My name is Mark, and I never thought I would have to tell this story. It's not a happy story. It doesn't have a neat ending. It's about the day the person I was supposed to be died. My body was fine, but my future? It went up in smoke 12 years ago. I didn't set that fire, but everyone I loved believes I did. For more than a decade, I have lived in the shadow of a crime that wasn't mine. I carry a label that terrified employers, that ruined relationships, a label put there by the one man who was supposed to protect me above all others. My own father. He watched me pack my bags when I was barely 18. He watched me board a Greyhound bus with $50 in my pocket. And he let everyone believe I was a monster who tried to burn down our family legacy. Why? Because the truth would have cost him his reputation, and a lie only cost him his son. We lived in a small town, the kind where everyone knows your grandfather's name. My father, Arthur, owned the local hardware store. It had been in our family for 3 generations on Main Street. Dad was the town pillar. He was a deacon at the church. He was head of the business association. He was obsessed with how things looked. Image was currency to him. In his house, there was no room for error. I was the error. I wasn't a bad kid. I just wasn't him. I liked art and music. I hated sports. I got average grades. To Arthur, that was practically criminal. He needed a perfect reflection of himself to show the town. He got me instead. We fought constantly, mostly about my future, which he had mapped out for me in the store. A future I didn't want. I turned 18 in May. The fire happened in June. It was a very dry summer. I remember waking up to sirens screaming past my window. The sky over Main Street was glowing orange. By dawn, the store was gone. Just wet ash, twisted metal, and the smell of 3 generations burned to the ground. The next day, 2 police detectives came to the house. They didn't talk to me. They went straight into my father's study and closed the door. 30 minutes later, my father came out alone. He looked devastated, but not sad. He looked angry. "They found something," he said. His voice was ice cold. "Near the back loading dock, where you sneak out to smoke." I froze. I hadn't been near the store in 2 days. "Dad, I wasn't there." He didn't let me speak. He just held up a hand. He laid it out for me. The town already knew we were fighting. People knew I was troubled, as he liked to call it. The police had serious questions. He gave me a choice, a horrifying choice. I could stay and face an arson investigation. He said I would go to prison. It would destroy my mother. Or I could leave. Right now. He gave me an envelope with some cash. He said never come back. He said if I left quietly, he would convince the police not to pursue charges, to spare the family the shame of a trial. I was 18. I was terrified. I believed him. I thought he was saving me from prison. I packed a bag in 10 minutes. I left that afternoon without saying goodbye to my mom. The next 12 years were harder than I can explain. I worked on oil rigs in the Gulf. I drove long-haul trucks. I worked in kitchens where they paid cash under the table. I stayed away from people. I learned not to make friends because eventually they ask about your family. The story followed me anyway. In a small town, rumors have wings. My father told everyone I had a breakdown, that I burned down our legacy in a fit of teenage rage because I didn't want the responsibility. He played the grieving, stoic victim perfectly. The town rallied around him. They held fundraisers. They helped him rebuild his store, bigger and grander than before. Meanwhile, I couldn't get a decent apartment. Background checks were a nightmare. Even without a conviction, the accusation was there in the police logs. I was the arsonist kid. I missed my cousin's weddings. I missed my grandmother's funeral. I was completely erased from the family portrait. I carried the guilt for years. I wondered if maybe I was bad. Maybe I deserved this exile. Everything changed last month. My Aunt Sarah passed away. She was my father's older sister. She was a quiet, nervous woman who lived on the edge of town. She was the only one who occasionally sent me a Christmas card. No note, just a generic card with a $10 bill. I risked going back for the funeral. I stayed in a Lenja motel 2 towns over so no one would recognize me. I stood at the very back of the cemetery, hidden by a large oak tree. My father saw me. He looked right through me like I was made of glass. He didn't nod. He didn't look angry. He just looked blank. After the service, a lawyer found me at my motel. He handed me a sealed manila envelope. Sarah had left it for me in her will with strict instructions. Inside was a messy stack of papers and a small red journal. It was Sarah's diary. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the pages. I opened it to June 14th, the night of the fire. The handwriting was shaky and hurried. She wrote that Arthur came to her house that night at 2 a.m., hours before the fire started. He was frantic. He was crying. He told her the bank was calling in the loans on the store. The business was underwater. He had made bad investments trying to expand too fast. He was going to lose everything. The reputation, the house, the legacy he talked about so much. She wrote down exactly what he said next. It has to look like an accident, Sarah. Or maybe vandalism. The insurance pays double for vandalism. My breath caught in my throat. Below the journal were copies of bank statements she had hidden for him. They were covered in red ink. Final notices. Foreclosure warnings dated weeks before the fire. And at the very bottom of the stack, a letter from the insurance company. It was dated 3 months after the fire. It was an approval letter for the full payout. A massive amount of money. The cause of fire was officially listed as undetermined act of vandalism. The primary suspect was listed as a transient individual, possibly estranged family member. I sat on that lumpy motel bed. I didn't move for hours. The sun went down, and the room got dark. It wasn't rage I felt at first. It was a deep, sickening nausea. He hadn't saved me from prison that day. He had framed me. He used his own son as the scapegoat to cash in an insurance policy. He needed a villain to make the vandalism story believable. And I was convenient. I was the rebellious teenager everyone already suspected. All those years I felt guilty. All those years I thought I was broken. He let me carry that weight. He let the whole town hate me. He let my mother die 3 years ago thinking I was a criminal. Just so he wouldn't look like a business failure. I realized then that my exile wasn't a punishment. It was part of the deal. I had to be gone so I couldn't ask questions. So I couldn't defend myself. I sat in the dark and made a decision. I wasn't 18 anymore. I wasn't scared, lonely kid on a bus. I was a man who had survived 12 years of hell. I knew what I had to do, and it wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be violent. It was just going to be the truth. I drove into my hometown the next morning. The town was busy. Banners hung across Main Street. They read, Phoenix Rising Celebration. They were honoring my father that night in the town square. 12 years since the fire. 12 years of resilience. He was getting a plaque from the mayor. It was perfect timing. I didn't go to the police station. Not yet. I went to the small brick building that housed the county newspaper. The editor was a young woman named Chloe. She wasn't from around here originally. She didn't know who I was. I walked into her office and laid the heavy manila envelope on her desk. I have a story for you, I said. About the Phoenix Rising celebration tonight. She looked skeptical. What kind of story? I laid out the diary, the bank notices, the insurance payout letter. I laid down a picture of me and my dad in front of the old store when I was 10. Then I told her my name. Her eyes went wide. You're the son, she whispered. The one who started the fire. No, I said calmly. I'm the insurance policy. We spent 4 hours going over the documents. It was undeniable. My aunt, bless her guilt-ridden heart, had kept the receipts of his desperation. The timeline matched perfectly. The motive was clear on every overdue bank notice. Chloe looked at me across the desk, stunned. Why now? She asked. Why didn't he just tell the truth back then? Because the truth isn't profitable, I said. And failure doesn't look good on a plaque. I told her I wasn't looking for money. I didn't want a reunion. I just wanted my name back. She typed furiously for the next 2 hours. We timed it perfectly. That evening, the sun was setting over the town square. A crowd of about 300 people gathered. There was a small temporary stage set up near where the old store used to be. My father was up there wearing a tailored suit. The mayor was shaking his hand. The brass plaque glinted under the streetlights. Dad looked so proud, so righteous. He stepped up to the microphone. The crowd clapped cheerily. He started talking about faith, about overcoming adversity, about how this town lifted him up from the ashes of tragedy. I stood at the very back edge of the crowd, in the shadows. About 5 minutes into his speech, phones started buzzing in pockets all around me. A few at first, then dozens, then hundreds. It was the digital alert for the evening edition of the paper. Chloe had pushed the publish button. The headline was simple and devastating: "The Ashes of Truth, the real story behind the Main Street fire." I watched the ripple effect move through the crowd. It was fascinating. People looked down at their screens, frowning. Then their heads snapped up toward the stage. Then they looked at each other, whispering. The polite applause that usually punctuated his speech didn't happen. It got very quiet in the square. My father stopped mid-sentence. He sensed the shift in the air. He looked out at the crowd, confused by the sudden silence. He smiled nervously. As I was saying, he tried to continue. Someone near the front held up their phone. "Is this true, Arthur?" they shouted. "Did you frame your boy?" My father froze. The color drained out of his face under the stage lights. He looked like a deer caught on a highway. He scanned the crowd, desperate. And then his eyes found me at the edge of the light. I wasn't hiding anymore. I just stood there. I didn't smile. I didn't yell. I just held up my own phone, showing the headline. Our eyes locked across 12 years of silence. In that moment, he knew. He knew Sarah had kept his secrets, and he knew I had found them. The mask of the resilient hometown hero cracked wide open. I didn't stay for the fallout. I didn't need to see him stammer or try to deny it. The truth was out of the bag, and it wasn't going back in. I walked away from the square, got in my truck, and drove out of town. The same way I did when I was 18. Only this time I wasn't running away. I was moving on. I heard about what happened later, of course. The state insurance fraud investigators arrived on Monday morning. The story was too big to ignore. The mayor quietly took the plaque back. The church asked him to step down as deacon to avoid distraction. He didn't go to jail. The lawyers said too much time had passed since the fraud to prosecute him criminally. But his reputation, the one thing he sacrificed his own son on an altar to protect, it was gone, incinerated faster than the store ever was. He sits alone in that big house now, the town pariah, the man who sold his son for an insurance payout. No one wants to do business with a man like that. As for me, the article changed everything. With the truth public, I was finally able to get that arson notation cleared from my background check. It took some legal work, but Chloe's article provided the momentum we needed. I got a supervisor license for construction last week. I have a steady girlfriend named Sarah, coincidentally. We are talking about buying a small house. It will be far away from that town. I don't talk to my father. I never will. He got to keep the insurance money, but I got to keep the truth. And finally, after 12 years, I can breathe again.